Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Buckeye Politics. Today, we're going to be taking a quick look at the swing state of Nevada. We're going to be looking at the polls and looking at some early vote numbers that are actually looking very good for Republicans. We're going to talk about what that might mean on Election Day and all that good stuff. So, if you're new, please be sure to like and subscribe. And so, let's get right into it. So, Nevada, out of all the states that are really going to be competitive on election night, has the least electoral votes. It only has 6, compared to like Pennsylvania with 19, Wisconsin with 10, Georgia with 16. But it is still important because although it did vote for Hillary Clinton in 2016 and Joe Biden in 2020, it elected a Republican governor in 2022, and it has been slowly but surely moving to the right. If you look at polls in the state of Nevada, it's kind of gone back and forth. Very early on, Trump had a lead, then Harris took the lead. Then it's kind of gone back and forth. Both sides have basically been within a point of each other, except for a little bit at the end of September when Kamala Harris was ahead by about a point and a half. But recently, Trump has surged, and since October 25th, the last week or so, Trump has led by about half a point in Nevada. Now, that average is kind of being carried by a couple of different polls that have Trump up by 6 and by 4, which it'd be very unlikely Trump wins the state by that margin. So that's kind of inflating the polling average, because if you look at the other polls, it's basically Harris plus 1, and a bunch of them, a couple have it even. So Nevada, by all intents and purposes, along with Pennsylvania, is going to be a very close state. Probably at least based on polling, the closest state this cycle, along with Pennsylvania. Both of those two states are listed as even on 538 in terms of where they're leaning. While states like Wisconsin and Michigan are leaning more to the Democrats, while North Carolina and Georgia are leaning more to the Republicans. So with the polls basically being neck and neck, let's look at the early vote. So there was a lot of good signs for Republicans in the early vote, actually. So on the 14th, this came out literally just this morning, very early in the morning, because Nevada releases their stuff like in the middle of the night, because of course they do. The 14th and final day of Nevada's early in-person voting has ended. So early in-person voting is done. You can still mail in your ballot, but actually showing up to vote early, that is done. So that's over. So the final results from that were Republicans at 393,811 votes, Democrats at 344,539 votes. So Republicans hold about a 50,000 vote lead overall. And that doesn't seem like a lot, but Nevada, as you saw earlier, is not a very heavily populated state. And also, about 75% of votes are going to be cast before Election Day. Nevada is a state that usually has overwhelming amounts of people vote early and mail in their ballots. You have a lot of seniors, you have a lot of working class people who can't get to the polls on Election Day. So people tend to vote early in Nevada. So usually the early vote is an important sign at how the race is going to go. So Republicans lead by almost 5 points and about 50,000 votes. Obviously, there is still mail-in voting that will continue for the next 3 days until Election Day, and then obviously there'll be a lot of turnout on Election Day. But it's going to be interesting to see how much that lead decreases and who is left to vote. So the rural areas in terms of Nevada have just turned out in huge margins from what I've seen in the early in-person vote, which is good because that's where Republicans do very well, and they need to be winning those areas in big margins if Trump and Sam Brown, who's running for Senate, both want to win. Clark County and Washoe County, which are home to both Reno and Las Vegas, respectively, their turnout is actually lower than usual, and the Republicans are leading there. But still, those are more Democratic-leaning areas. There's still people that need to vote and need to mail in their ballots. And so we're going to get a couple more updates out of Nevada from the mail-in vote, which is likely to cut into the Republican lead, but it's going to be interesting to see how much, because Election Day in Nevada usually will favor Republicans. The big question at this point is whether or not the Republicans who are voting early are people who would have voted on Election Day. Because if that's the case, then if Democrats will probably vote more on Election Day and win, and it really doesn't matter. But if these are independents, if these are new voters, which there's some data that says that it might be, we just don't know, then it would be very good for Republicans because they're already ahead. If they're going to win the Election Day vote, they're going to win relatively handily, even if Democrats cut into the lead they have currently with mail-in ballots. So we have basically the same thing here. This is for a tweet from John Ralston, who is a reporter for the Nevada Independent. he has a kind of a left-wing bias, but he has been very accurate in Nevada. He predicted Hillary would win when the polls had the race basically tied. He predicted Biden would win. He predicted Republicans would lose the Senate race in 2022, which they did, even though the polling seemed to show that Republicans would win. But he did predict Republicans would win the governor race in 2022, and they did. So this guy has been very accurate with his predictions in Nevada, and even he is sounding the alarm for Democrats. And like I said, he's a pretty left-leaning individual. He tweets about like supporting Kamala and other stuff. And he's saying that the rural landslide is continuing, and Democrats have to turn out voters in Clark County, which is Las Vegas, or they're pretty much screwed, because this is something that has never really happened in Nevada politics. Republicans leading so big in the early vote and turning out at just such crazy margins in rural parts of the state. So like I said, a lot of this comes down to whether or not the people Republicans are turning out are like traditional Republicans who would have voted on election day, but instead they're voting early, because then it really doesn't matter. You know, I mean, the Democrats would just vote on election day and they would win. But if these are voters Republicans are turning out for the first time, if there may be people who just moved to Nevada, we have seen some rumors that there's conservatives from California that are moving to Nevada, so these may be some of those voters as well, then maybe this is a very good sign for Republicans. So we kind of have to wait and see. There's a lot of good signs for the GOP, but there's also some warning signs, such as the fact that the polls still have the race very tight. If Republicans were really having a huge surge, you would kind of expect the polling to reflect that. And it sort of has the last, 2-3 days. But, I mean, mail-in voting has been going on, and early voting has been going on for a couple weeks, and there really hasn't been a huge shift to the GOP. So we'll have to wait and see. So really what this comes down to is what happens on election day and election night. But overall, Nevada does look pretty solid for Republicans. So let's just play out really quickly. Let's assume Trump holds on to North Carolina, which he won both in 2016 and 2020, and Democrats have been pulling money out of. Let's say he wins Georgia and Arizona, which are both states that he won in 2016, and he lost by the skin of his teeth in 2020, but he's now leading in relatively handily in 2020. That would put Trump at 262 electoral votes. Let's say he wins Nevada, which is looking good for him at this point. That puts him at 268. So Trump would still need to win either Wisconsin, Michigan, or Pennsylvania. He'd have to crack into the blue wall in the Rust Belt once again in order to win. So while Nevada is definitely a good sign Republicans are doing well there, because if Republicans are doing well in Nevada, which has a large Hispanic population, they're probably doing well in a place like Arizona, Texas, New Mexico. Not that New Mexico is competitive, but still, it's a good sign for Trump in Arizona, basically, because Nevada and Arizona are pretty similar, like demographically, in terms of the Hispanic populations. So there are good signs for Republicans in Nevada that could translate to other states, but still, fundamentally, Trump has to crack either Wisconsin, Michigan, or Pennsylvania in order to win the election, even though things do look good in the South. So basically, this election is going to be very close either way. Trump is probably going to get at least a couple of these Sun Belt states. There'd have to be a huge polling miss for him not to, and it looks good in Nevada as well. So if you're the Trump campaign, I would probably focus on turning out the last few voters on election day in Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, and focus a lot of energy on the Rust Belt, because this is really where the race is going to be won or lost for both candidates, really. So with that, thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one.